we'll go ahead and get the meeting kicked off. And I want to welcome everybody to our Tuesday, May 26th Rotary meeting, our Zoom meeting. We have a very interesting program today. And just a couple quick housekeeping items for everyone that's on. If you're not muted, if you could go ahead and mute so we don't have any surprises today in the background. So you can mute that and then you can unmute it when we have questions as well.
You're back, yeah.
All right, must have somehow I got muted. So I'm not sure where I left off, but visiting Rotarians or visitors, under the chat screen, if you could click on the bottom, so we can recognize you on the Zoom meeting today. So we'd like that. And then if I didn't mention already, mute. Somebody muted me, which is a lot of fun. If you could definitely make sure you're on mute so we don't have any surprises during the meeting, cell phones, things like that. So very happy to have everybody here today. And with that, we'll go ahead and kick off our meeting with our song and our pledge. And I'll have Joe take that away.
America, America, God shed His grace on thee. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and a mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine till all success be nobleness, and every gain
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Joe. And with that, we'll move right into our invocation with Eric Spivey today. So Eric, unmute and take it away, sir.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. Would you pray with me? Now, God of all gallant hearts, save us today from any thoughts of pitying ourselves for the challenges we face. Instead, O Lord, rebuild our strength and renew our courage. Inspire us by the example of our heroes, both those in Rotary and those in our community and those of our faith. O Lord, may you help us to find that your mercy is no end, even for ourselves. Send us now into the turmoil of this day and the days ahead with a glad heart, with purposeful thoughts, and the strength to guide us each and every day. Grant this, we pray, in your name. Amen.
Okay, just to thank you, Eric, and just a few quick, or really just an announcement for today. I don't believe I received any emails from anybody to add announcements today. So if you have a Rotarian friend that is going to catch us on YouTube, it's always on YouTube afterwards. You can get credit for attending the meeting. Just go to info@rotarygainesville.org and go ahead and put that information in so you can get credit for at least joining the meeting after the fact. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and we have some comments from President Chad. President, take it away.
I don't really have any comments for today. I think we're all excited to hear today's speaker. So Tom, would you please introduce today's speaker?
Thank you very much, Chad. It's a great honor for me to introduce today's speaker, a longtime friend. F. King Alexander was most recently the president and chancellor of Louisiana State University, LSU, holding that post since 2013. While at LSU, Dr. Alexander oversaw over 50,000 students on 5 campuses, as well as 2 medical schools. He will become the new president of Oregon State University beginning on July 1st. Dr. Alexander previously served as president of California State University, Long Beach, and president of Murray State University. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a Master of Science degree from the University of Oxford, and a Bachelor of Arts degree from St. Lawrence University in New York, where he became captain of the university basketball team in 1986 and 1987. He also served on the faculty of the University of Illinois, and while in Urbana-Champaign, Dr. Alexander served on the Rhodes Scholars Selection Committee for Illinois, and during his days as a student at Oxford, he was awarded an Oxford Blue in men's basketball. Recently, King was selected into the Boys and Girls Club's Hall of Fame in Atlanta, Georgia. King is an old Hogtown guy from right here in Gainesville and a graduate of Buchholz High School, where he played basketball with Vernon Maxwell. He had many positive influences while growing up in Gainesville, maybe the most important being his mother, Dr. Ruth Alexander, a Gainesville legend, known nationally and internationally as an advocate for women's sports. His mother was the founder of Lady Gator Athletic Program, hiring the first women's coaches at UF, and creator of the mascot, Alberta the Alligator. Ruth also founded the Florida Governor's Council on Physical Fitness for Sports and served on the President's Council for Physical Fitness, appointed by then President Richard Nixon. She was also the founder of the Girls Club in Gainesville and sponsored the longest running Boys and Girls Clubs of Alachua County football team known as Alexander's Raiders. Finally, 45 years ago, in 1975, King led the Suburban Heights Basketball League in scoring, a stat his older brother Kearney disputes to this day, just nosing out Bobby Carlson and yours truly. I give you, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. F. King Alexander.
Thank you, Tommy, and thank you all. When Tommy first mentioned this opportunity to me just to come back, and if I was ever in Gainesville going to visit my mother, he said, would you like to come by Rotary? Because he knows that I've been a part of the Rotary at Murray, Kentucky when I was there, part of the Rotary in Long Beach, California when I was there, and part of the Baton Rouge Rotary. So in many ways, I've been a Rotarian for a long time, but I've just been at a bunch of different Rotaries in different parts of the country. So I appreciate the work that the Rotary does. I appreciate all the scholarship supports you give students. More importantly, I'll share just a brief comment about my mother, because I'm nobody in Gainesville except my mother's second son, Ruth Alexander's second son. And my mother always said her crowning achievement without everything that she's done in life was she taught Emmitt Smith how to dance in his first dance class. And Emmitt went on to win Dancing with the Stars, if you remember, for the first one they had. And my mother's always took great pride in singing the praises of teaching Emmitt Smith how to dance. So I appreciate you allowing me to come and say hello to everybody, to check on everybody. Back in January, when this was a possibility, I was going to have a much different discussion, a much different discussion than what we're dealing with today. Because I think cities like Gainesville, cities like Baton Rouge, cities like Corvallis, these are really precarious times for us. There are 80,000 college students that are on the brink of coming to Gainesville, whether it's at UF or Santa Fe. And with that 80,000 student population, it's not just tuition and fees and the auxiliaries or the apartments that they live in, but those students, every student spends about $10,000 to $12,000 a year, 10 to 12,000 in just auxiliary expenses, movies, food, dining, gasoline, getting your car fixed. So this is about a potential $600 to $800 million additional hit if we aren't having in-person classes, which is really a challenging environment that we have to make a determination. Florida will have to do it a little sooner than we do because we're on a trimester period at Oregon State. So we won't start classes till September 16th, but Florida always starts theirs around August 8th or 9th. So these decisions are about at most 30 days away that are impact the Gainesville economy and the surrounding region's economy very, very significantly. Accompanying that, the university and university towns like the University of Florida, there's the potential state budget reductions. And we know Texas is looking at $1 billion hole. Georgia and Tennessee, it's 120 million each. And it takes me back to our work in Washington. And the only thing that comes to mind, even though these are two very different circumstances, was in 2008 when the 3 stimulus packages went into effect, the Recovery Act in 09, 10, and 11. We had to argue in Washington. We had to get our legislators throughout the country, because we were in California at the time, that they needed to support the stimulus effort to help state governments, which, by the way, 1 out of every 7 jobs is either a local or state government job. That includes fire workers, that's fire department officials, police officials, school teachers on the front line, healthcare workers are part of this discussion. This is a very important next 30 days to either help the University of Florida and Santa Fe get through this next year without catastrophic reductions, because we're talking about the same thing. Oregon State's looking at $123 million that they normally would receive from students coming on campus. And that also does not include a sporting reduction, of which I would guess 70% of the Florida Athletic Department is funded through 7 days in the fall, because that's about the number LSU is. That's about $80 million of $135 million athletic program that basically those funds go to support the rest of the programs. There may only be 2 that break even, and that might be baseball, basketball, and maybe even gymnastics now. But all the other programs are highly contingent upon what happens on those 7 weekends in Gainesville in the fall. Not to mention the businesses that benefit, the hotels, the restaurants. So this time is not just about the pandemic. It's about how university communities and university cities are going to have to pull together, because such a major percentage of the revenues that are generated throughout businesses, throughout Rotary leaders, is deeply highly contingent upon whether they're going to be students on campus or not, or if they're going to be online all over the world. So I think that this is a tough time for all of us, but this is where a Champaign-Urbana looks very much like Gainesville, a Corvallis and Eugene, Oregon look very much like Gainesville, and a Baton Rouge looks very much like Gainesville, because so much of the economy is driven by 55,000 students that show up at UF and another 16,000 that show up at Santa Fe. So I don't know if people fully understand these are the types of discussions we're having in Washington, but also the types of discussions that I'm having with the Oregon State and LSU people on how we're going to pull ourselves out of this, because we will have never taken a hit like this in the history of our institutions. And that's why we're working on federal support for the University of Florida and federal support to get to Santa Fe to protect jobs and to protect the jobs of the Terwilliger Elementary School teachers where I went, protect the Fort Clark teachers where I'm a graduate of Fort Clark also. People underestimate the substantial impact of shutting our institutions down. Finally, on that front, what most people don't understand fully is the University of Florida right now probably has anywhere from 8 to 10 construction projects that are underway. And those are bonded out, and those are bonded construction projects that may be residential life construction projects, or they may be state funded out of Tallahassee, where the state legislature passed capital bonds that would build, say, $135 million new science facility. all of those bonds now are in extreme jeopardy. What? Because they're pulling back on the commitments that they've made in states throughout the country because of the uncertainty of what a state budget looks like. So this isn't a warning. It's just everybody really needs to come together to understand the ramifications on a city like Gainesville and its citizens and the Rotary and the businesses, because in the next 30 to 45 days, we're going to know an awful lot more about what the University of Florida's budget's going to look like. Is it going to be a 10 or a 20% budget reduction? And even a 10% after going through what we did in the recession, we're still not back. Our universities, only a handful, are still not back to our pre-recession funding level in 2008. So this is a compounding impact that I wanted our Rotary to know about, but also that we're in the same boat as Gainesville. We're in Corvallis, we're in the same boat in Baton Rouge, and we're worried about all of these possibilities that could occur in the next 30 to 45 days that will determine whether they're going to be students on campus or not. California State University, the largest system in America, said they're not going to have on-campus classes for 500,000 students that would be going to the Cal States. These issues are just around the corner, and I think it's something the Rotary should be talking about. And it's just hard for people to imagine that we either might not be playing sports, but we might be playing it in front of nobody. So these things are all being discussed each and every day in Washington and in higher education. And my friends in Gainesville, I want you to know that we're all in the same boat on this, but we've got to work through it and work through it together. And the role that Rotary plays made me even be a new role that Rotary plays. But this is a vitally important issue, especially for a university town like Gainesville. Questions you have for me that I can help with or share with you what we're working on that I know is highly relevant to the folks in Gainesville.
Do you all have any questions, or do you want to put them in the chat box?
I'll fire one at you right away, King, verbally. Of course, we all follow what's going on in the media quite a bit. There's a lot of discussion regarding collegiate athletics at the level of the athletic directors and the conference leadership. Where do the presidents, where are they in this discussion currently?
So it's interesting because we're trying to prompt, actually this week, we're trying to prompt the NCAA to making a call sooner rather than later, because it's not going to make much sense. The presidents all know that the Pac-12 can't just say, we're not going to play in front of anybody. The SEC can't say that we're going to vote to not play in front of anybody when the ACC says you can, because that's not going to sit well in South Carolina if Clemson's playing in front of fans and South Carolina's not, or it's not going to sit well in Texas if Texas A&M has fans and Texas Austin doesn't. Iowa, Iowa State, the list, this is much more than a conference issue. And the NCAA is going to have to step to the plate at some point. I think we're all trying to buy as much time as possible right now. We're allowing some small groups of athletes to come back June 1st, but football's different. I mean, you've got 100 athletes, and they've got to come back. And in fact, each of our athletes, now we require our entire student athletic body to be on campus in the summer so they can build up course credits, so they can make up courses, and we keep them corralled working out all summer. Now we're talking about just a handful of athletes as we're moving into some serious fall scheduling issues. This has to be done at a much higher level, Tommy. You can't have one conference saying we're going to do it and the other conference saying we're not going to do it. That's where I think that there's too many in Louisville and Kentucky. You just go state by state, and it's not going to work within that arena. The NCAA is going to have to come together, and the presidents are going to have to share what we know in the last minute with the NCAA, and we're going to have to support what the NCAA says.
Hey, King, we have a question regarding what models do you see or are you working on or do you see from other universities to get students on campus?
Okay, just quantitatively, about 68% of the nation's presidents we're expecting in an optimistic way to be bringing our students back to campus. About 10% believe that they're not going to bring them back at the moment. And these are the big schools. So this is Big 10. This is your big five conferences. That's your 65 schools. There's another 15 to 20% that believe we're going to have a hybrid approach to this. And hybrid means that what classes can you space students out in? And what classes do you have to have online? Do you allow faculty to come in and teach classes who are 60 and over who are more vulnerable to a virus? Or do we tell our faculty that have respiratory problems or have any other kind of health problems, do we ask them to stay at home and teach online? If you were to ask me right now, I think we're looking at a hybrid model. I'm thinking maybe the University of Florida is able to bring back maybe 20,000 to 25,000 students, and then maybe 30 to space these things out. Now, this is a raw prediction, but many of us have become very good online, and we have the safe and health of everybody is what's at stake here. That's faculty, staff, and students. There's still just a lot of logistical problems. The University of Arizona said they'll test every student, every faculty member and staff as they come in, but it still takes 2 weeks to get that test back. So what are we telling these students during that 2-week period? We bring them to campus, test them, and tell them to go home? Logistically, there are a lot of problems with what's being proposed, and some things sound a lot better than they really are. The other question is, once they test and they're test negative as they enter the institution, how frequently do we test them when they leave a dining hall? Or how do we test them once every 3 weeks? Do we test them once a month? And that doesn't even bring into the cost of these tests if we have to administer them. So you're seeing a lot of variations in these scenarios popping up around the country. Some saying they're not going to bring students back. Most saying we plan to, but that could change in the next 4 to 6 weeks based on what happens in the pandemic, based on what happens, what the health experts say within our own states. So I think you're seeing a lot of scenarios being lined up. We have 6 different scenarios at Oregon State planned. They vary from no sports to playing in front of nobody to starting school at the end of October and not early September or mid-September. And so we're working through a scenario after scenario, including the test model. If tests pop up, do we test 35,000 students, all faculty and staff? Can we get those results back in time? Or do we get the tens of millions of dollars to do the tests as well? And how many new healthcare workers do we hire and how many residence halls do we quarantine off when students do get the virus? And we have to take a number of hallways in each of these residence hall and basically turn them into a quarantined hallway with health professionals and equipment and everything else that might need to go along with having students on campus. So it is the big question.
Thank you, King. How do you anticipate to get the athletic departments to come to an agreement? What should the NCAA decide? Can you speak on that a bit?
Yeah, so right now we're starting to see a lot of you got the NBA talking about playing in Orlando. The German soccer league is they're underway playing in front of nobody. I do think the NCAA is going to make a call on this at some point that if the pandemic is getting better and not getting worse, we're going to try to do some things. But once again, the worst case scenario is that we bring back athletics. But already we've said that we're not bringing back athletics if we don't have our students there either. So we can't just bring back athletics and not have students on campus. So there's going to be a hybrid approach to this. And the NCAA is going to have to step to the plate. This isn't a conference by conference decision. It's a health decision, but also we have various recommendations coming out of our own state CDCs. that are going to tell us whether we can do some things and can't do other things. So I think the NCAA is going to have to play an important role in making some recommendations, but then the states are going to have to accept, the governors are going to have to accept that along with the universities.
How has the pandemic affected the financial aid system?
So the financial aid system actually of all the things that have gotten an infusion in the CARES Act, the financial aid, so students got about half of the 14 billion. So we've been able to prop up our students with additional financial aid. Now, if their parents have lost their jobs, they've lost their jobs. This is where we're trying to help them to reapply for more financial aid. But here's where it will hit the University of Florida. It's the out-of-state students. What we're seeing is the out-of-state students are more likely to stay closer to home during all this. And the in-state students are going to stay closer to home, but the out-of-state students, we're looking at a dip in out-of-state numbers and a major dip in international numbers because of lack of ability to get visas. The visas have been shut down. So Florida will take a substantial hit, I believe, on out-of-state and international students, as we will in Oregon. When that comes back, we don't know. But a lot of these parents also from out of state are paying more, but a lot of them have been laid off. And so they're less likely to send their kids out of state, not simply for health reasons, but for financial reasons, because of the layoffs, the unemployment claims that have been going on just in virtually every state. I think we're up to 21% now in unemployment claims. And that's a lot of students that we don't know what that outcome is going to be when they don't show up.
Thank you. How will COVID-19 impact the future of higher education? How will this permanently impact change? That's
a big prediction that I don't have the answers on, but I do believe we're going to see, we probably propelled our universities into online education about 10 years in advance of where they would be. And I think that you will see many, many students, as many already are, that will go in person for half a year and go online for half a year or half a career or 3/4 of a career. But you'll see students graduating with 25 to 40% of their courses online. That would be my prediction. That means they're going to take them at home in the summer. That means they may take them in their residence hall to augment their own schedule. I think right now you got a number of universities who are positioned very well and anticipated this type of education. We're well in front of it. And you got a lot out there that just refuse to do it, much of it, including a lot of rich Ivy League institutions that said that's not how they educate. We're going to see a big shakeup with the institutions that have the capacity to do online, that have the capacity to do what we're doing today. And so I do think it propelled the online education model about 10 years ahead of where we are today.
Do you expect to see a mandatory mask policy on campuses?
I think you will see a mandatory mask policy on a number of campuses. We're talking about doing that as well. That especially in those students living in close confinements with other students, I expect to see the dining halls open all day long and students getting time slots where they can go to the dining hall, where they can stay away from the mass groups that go to these dining halls. And you may have a 4 to 5:30 dinner slot or a 7 to 8 o'clock dinner slot based on your schedule. I think you're going to see a lot of changes like this that keep students spread out. It's spread out, and what troubles me is seeing kind of the crowds that gathered in the Ozarks, crowds that gathered in Daytona this past weekend. Well, students, and many of these are students, and unfortunately, they like to congregate around each other in large groups. So we're going to have to get really good at this really quickly. And masks, in fact, I just received 3 Oregon State Beaver masks in the university's logo. I've already recommended that we give one of those to every incoming student if we're going in person.
Thank you, King. The next question is back to athletics. schools have cut programs. Many have been men's programs. And there's been some discussion, at least in the media, that Title IX might have to be revisited because of these unique circumstances. So first, could you define Title IX for everyone and then speak on that question?
Sure. So Title IX, we know it in the athletic arena, is protecting our female students' right to play sports, to get scholarship support, to have the same percentage or aspire to get to the same percentage of scholarship support or fiscal support that our men's programs get. That's the athletic side of it. The other side of it is the sexual assault, harassment, the new reports that have come out of Department of Education and Betsy DeVos's office, which will be very difficult to implement on that side. But there are discussions about suspending at least the way that we quantify Title IX in athletics, because if we don't play football, Title IX is solved. I mean, for many schools. If we do play football, we're getting in the situation where you're always aspiring to give more women scholarships, which would cost men scholarships. I see track and field in trouble. And I do see track and field, and looking at some of the programs that I'm hearing about, track and field, those that still have wrestling, a number of these other programs, the Olympic sport programs, swimming and diving, maybe not at Florida, but swimming and diving is not that popular at a lot of other schools. But I do see that many of those sports are going to be discussed. And instead of a 10-year phase out period, you could see this expedited, and schools could lose 15 to 20% of their programs. But they can't violate Title IX in doing so. So they can't just pick women's programs. They're going to have to look at some men's programs. I forgot where I read that somebody's including men's baseball as a sport they're going to drop already. That has something to do with the Title IX numbers that they currently have. So there could be a suspension of just the progress made on this for 1 or 2 years, but then we'll go right back to how we quantify female athletic scholarships, female athletic coaching salaries, and it could ultimately slow the coach salary race down, which I think every president in the United States wants to see something happen in the arms race. Athletics it's in the middle of that we don't have a good answer for.
Since there is an expected decline in out-of-state and international students, do you believe that universities will take advantage of all the in-state students who want to attend?
I think those that have the capacity to do so will. I'd say the schools that are this is where Florida is in pretty good shape. Florida has got an out-of-state cap on how many students they can take. Virginia doesn't. Virginia is 50% out-of-state. Alabama is 78% out-of-state freshmen as part of their freshman class. South Carolina is 68% out-of-state as part of their freshman class. Oregon is 50%, and Oregon State's 25%. The institutions that didn't put all their marbles in the out-of-state bag, which have become a lot, including the University of Michigan, including University of Colorado Boulder, that lives off California students. They're going to have they're announcing furloughs and layoffs because they're seeing this has a much bigger impact on the Colorado Boulder, the Alabama, the South Carolina than it will the University of Florida, because Florida has the population, has the demographics to shift, but also because the University of Florida has limited the number of out-of-state students that come to the University of Florida. That's going to work to the University of Florida's advantage in this year and the coming years, and against Alabama's commitment not to serve the state of Alabama anymore. Same as South Carolina. They went to New Jersey to get all their freshmen, and that's going to change dramatically.
Do you think there's a potential for additional conference realignments?
This could shake it up to, it could be, I'd say the Big 12 is always in trouble. So Big 12 institutions are hurting. They're always adding institutions that would normally have not been in the Big 12. I think they only have 9 or 10, Tommy, the Big 12. And they're not even the Big 12 anymore. I think there's a high likelihood a number of these institutions can get picked off, and there might be some realignment. We're not hearing it in the Southeastern Conference meetings. That's not part of the discussion because all these other issues take such high precedence over that. But it could, at the end of the day, television revenues are $42 million for the University of Florida, the SEC network. That's 42 for LSU, 42 for Kentucky, 42 extra $1 million in television revenues on the SEC network. If they're not playing football, what does that mean to that $42 million?
Most of it.
Yeah. And it's grown from 10 since the 4 years that we put the network together. It started at 10, then it went to 20, then it went to 40, and now it's at 42 million. And that's per school. So there could be some realignment. You might see a lot of schools drop out of Division I too. They just can't afford it.
A moment ago, you touched on coaches' pay. What do you make of the facilities arms race in athletic departments?
I honestly think, just like the pros, there needs to be some kind of congressional intervention into this because it's just going to keep growing. It's going to keep growing. And ultimately, what I think and what I see happening is the bottom half of every one of these big conferences are just not going to be able to keep pace with the top half. And then they don't already. The Mississippi States and the Ole Misses of the world are not, they're spending half as much as the LSUs and Floridas and Alabamas. Washington State can't keep up with, I don't know if Oregon State can keep up with Oregon because of Nike. But the amount of disparity in these athletic conferences is growing rapidly. I think there's very few schools in the ACC that can keep up with Clemson and Florida State spending. Certainly not Wake Forest, and certainly not Virginia. And I think that if nothing gets done, there's going to be a whole nother league that's going to emerge out of this, and it will be the haves and the have-nots. And just knowing what the athletic departments spend and knowing that disparity is widening each and every year, that I think the Mississippi States, I think the Washington States, the Wake Forest, I think a lot of these institutions are not going to be able to keep up because they're not keeping up now. But if the big programs take a hit like they could take a hit, a $100 million hit, it could slow all this down. I know that the Pac-12 has already announced that they're not giving any coaches bonuses this year. And the coaches all had to agree to do that. That's a beginning step, but it could be something we see from now on for a long time. That was a problem with winning the national championship. We had to give bonuses to all our coaches for going to the SEC championship, then for winning it, then for going to the BCS, then for winning it, then for winning a national championship. We had to come up with $3 million extra that we hadn't had budgeted just for bonuses.
What are your thoughts on measuring qualifications of students with the elimination of the SAT and the ACT?
So this is a very timely question for us because my last 2 years at LSU, we went from taking two numbers, which is a GPA and a test score, and saying you're eligible based on two numbers, to saying that we want to take a closer look at your whole portfolio. We want to know what you've done in high school, what you've overcome in high school, what your senior grades are, which normally don't get counted because you've already been admitted and you're either admitted or turned down. So senior year turned into a big waste of time. We said we want to take a look at every student's holistic portfolio and in some ways quietly diminish the ACT and the SAT's overall value. We put too much weight on the SAT and ACT. And what we found out is when we went to a holistic approach, our rural kids got accepted more and our students of color got accepted more because they only took the test once. They're competing against students in rich school districts or competing against students who start taking practice ACT and SATs in 8th grade. So by the time they take their junior year exam, they've had Princeton review courses. I know I paid $2,500 to help my daughter get a Princeton review course to get her ACT score up. It's the poor kids and the rural kids that we discovered that did not have access to even getting to the test, taking it more than once. And most of the studies that we've seen, and I have to, Tony Carnevale out of the Georgetown Education Policy Center and Workforce Development, in his report said, the more weight you put on an SAT and an ACT, the richer and whiter your school's going to become, because that's just the economics of it all. And that was those are findings of his report. And what we learned is by helping students get access to even pre-ACT exams, which they didn't have access to. We knew those were kids in the rural areas, poor areas. Some of them were valedictorians at their high school, but their test score was 1 point below the minimum standard. And normally we would have turned them away. And then we found out that the kid was also president of their 4-H club, worked 3 jobs, had a single parent. And what we're doing is leveling the playing field by reducing the power of those 2 test scores. And quite honestly, those 2 test scores are private companies. They're private companies that test when they want to test you, not the other way around. So in Oregon, we have made it test option. In the last 4 months, we've said that the test can be a part of your portfolio, but it doesn't have to be. California just followed suit with what you saw, and I think it's probably the genesis of the question. I think you're going to see, and I know over 100 of the best universities in this country have devalued the test scores because we overvalued them to the disadvantage of poor, low income, and students of color.
What was your favorite story from leading LSU, and what are you most looking forward to in leading Oregon State?
So probably the strangest story is that I never realized as a president, there may become a time where you have to go find another tiger, an actual tiger, and bring it to Baton Rouge. So our Mike VI developed brain cancer while I was there. And we did everything possible. We took him to the hospital. It's a 600-pound Bengal tiger. The School of Veterinary Medicine operated on him, and he eventually passed away, and we had to put him under. Then the question was, before all the national organizations come in, can we find a rescue tiger? Are there tigers in jeopardy? And this is not my field of study at all. We found out there are 3,500 tigers in the wild in this world. There are 15,000 tigers in North America. And we found our tiger in South Florida in the Everglades. And what they were using this tiger for, we got him when he's 9 months old. He weighed about 200 pounds then. We got him when he's 9 months old. And what they were doing in South Florida at one of these private habitats is people were paying big money to bring their children over to have their pictures taken with tiger cubs. But when the tigers got too big where they could eat their children, they would sell them to the black market. They'd sell them to Asia and India for bones and teeth and medicinal purposes. And so we got a rescue tiger from South Florida that was 9 months old. We flew him in an ambulance plane across state lines. And just the logistics of working this out before the national organizations could start protesting, because once they found out it was a rescue tiger, they were very supportive. And that we have a whole school of veterinary medicine that takes care of this tiger every single day. And he eats well, he has complete health care coverage. And he's now 600 pounds and lives in a $3.5 million habitat on campus. Things you never thought you would ever have to learn is how many tigers there really are and how many are out there. I remember Albert the alligator, if you remember, sat right below the tower for years and years. Tommy, what year did they get rid of that? They get rid of Albert?
You're really stretching me now. I don't remember. It's been a while.
I will say sports-wise, it's and Chad and others, it's been kind of fun to be at different schools. And at Murray State, we had an outstanding basketball program. At Cal State, Long Beach State, our dirtbag team, we had Evan Longoria at third base and Troy Tulowitzki at short. And Misty May was our former volleyball player with Kerry Walsh. And then to go to LSU and then to have football jump up. It's nice to have balanced programs. It's nice to be strong in lots of different things. And just watching how all these programs have emerged, and particularly the women's sports at Florida. Florida is always good at women's sports. And I once again give credit to my mom seeing these things happen long before they did. And she told me when she started the Lady Gator athletic program and hired the first 3 coaches, that Bear Bryant told her that nobody will ever watch a woman play a sport. And Vince Dooley told her, and this is in the early 70s, Vince Dooley told her that women aren't supposed to have muscles. We've come a long way. As a father of 3 daughters, I'm thankful for her and that generation of female leaders in the Southeastern Conference. And just look at how great the Lady Gator athletic program is in so many sports.
Well, King, I think that's all the questions that we have other than the sarcastic Tiger King questions, which I'm going to skip for today's meeting. Thank you so much for speaking to us, to our group. Thank you for your time today. We will make a donation to inoculate 100 children from polio, and
good.
that will be made in your name and your honor. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Chad. And thank you all for taking the time and let me just share with you what we're working on that really is going to impact Gainesville in so many types of economic ways if we don't get good solutions in the next 30 to 45 days. And I wish you guys luck in managing a university town through some probably the most unusual circumstances we've ever seen in our universities and our university towns. Thank you all. Thank you, Tommy.
Yes, sir. Before
You're
we
very
go,
welcome, King.
Richard, would you tell us a bit about next week's program?
Yeah, sure will. And thanks again, Dr. Alexander. Those are great stories, great insights. I wish we had a way as a club to be able to share with you the entire stream of comments that are in the chat box, because there's a lot of personal challenges to you about your jump shot and things like that.
I want to know how he understands Ed Ogeron when he was there.
Well, I was one of the 2 people they wanted to fire because we hired Coach O. And I said, he's the only coach we ever had at LSU that doesn't have an accent.
That's good. Well, thanks again, Dr. Alexander. It's been great having you with us today.
Thank you, Richard.
And good luck with everything out in Oregon. One of our members mentioned that they've lived there before and that you're going to love it. I'm sure you know that.
Well, thank you all, and good luck in all this. And stay safe, and let's pull our universities through and our students.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So next week, our speaker is going to be Natalia Bannister, who's the executive director at the Pace Center for Girls. As many of you know, many of our fellow Rotarians have supported the Pace Center over the years, and Pace Center helps at promise girls who come from challenging life circumstances to shape the course of their future. It's a really, really amazing program. I know all of you who have heard about it before know how amazing it is. And the young women that it helps are equally amazing. We've had programs in the past about Pace Center, but these are unusual times, as Dr. Alexander just reminded us again. And like all of our local schools, the Pace Center has had to move to online virtual operations. Next week, we'll hear from a couple of the girls at Pace and from Natalia, who will tell us how they're meeting this challenge. So it should be an interesting program next week, and look forward to joining all of you.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you again, Dr. Alexander, for speaking to us. Our meeting is adjourned.